Hi, everybody. My name is Bob Carilla. I am one of the partners at Rizolve Partners, and I'm welcoming you to our series of podcasts whereby we are investigating the hidden secrets of business owners and specifically how they rely on exit planning to succeed in a transition. With me today is Steve Cummings. Steve is a managing partner of Rizolve Partners, and I want to welcome Steve and get on to chatting about our topic. Um, Specifically, this is the third in a series of podcasts. In the first one, in the first podcast, it was we stressed about the importance of starting early and planning the approach to a transition. In the second one, we talked about aligning your personal goals and your business goals and how important that is. Today, we're going to be focusing on market dynamics and positioning, which is so critically important to a successful transition. So again, welcome, Steve. And I've got a bunch of questions for you. So are you all ready to go?
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, I think it's important for our listeners to just understand what are we talking about when we talk about market dynamics and positioning. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's important for a business owner as they start to think about a transition to understand how they want to approach uh, the idea of valuing their business, and in particular, it's important to understand the difference between the individual's personal wants and needs regarding valuation or price that they want out of a transition versus what the market is prepared to pay. And the delta between those two positions, a business owner's valuation of his own business based on his wants and needs versus what the market is prepared to pay for a business based on how it presents to the market, and we call that a value gap. There may not be a value gap. The positions may be coincident, and if that's the case, then that would be ideal, and that's certainly a position that Rizolve want to get our business owners into. That we have managed them through to aligning their expectations from the sale with reality, based on the evidence that presents in the market, and we've aligned that with what's possible um, based on market participants' willingness to pay. So that's the first thing, is to realize that there may be a difference there, and here's where advisors can really add value to the business owners in showcasing to them what value is from a buyer's perspective, what buyers do particularly value. At Rizolve, we focus on 24 different value drivers, so there are many that we look at, not just profitability. There are 24 value drivers. So having an advisory group that can showcase to you how your business presents, how those value drivers are estimated, and the evidence is brought to bear, in a transition. Having that advisory group advise you on that, benchmark your company against other market transactions that have gone on, and the quality of the systems, processes, and people that were represented in those other transactions, and the profitability, of course. and so there's quite a bit to think about from the point of view of how your company presents. The other the other more commonly understood um, elements of market dynamics is how do you put a value on the company? And there are several ways to do that, and we're not going to go into that in detail. But many business owners will commonly understand that a level of profitability and cash flow or that comes out of a company will then be subjected to a multiple of earnings in one valuation method, um, and that will imply a value for your company. There's lots of sophistication around that as a concept that we won't deal with today, but profitability or EBITDA times a multiple will give you one estimate of value. Now, if you take those two concepts, profitability and the calculation of EBITDA is pretty well understood by many business owners. They generally have accountants that calculate those statistics at least once a year and more commonly monthly. So profitability and EBITDA is a number that is relatively well understood. However, when a company comes to market, the multiple that is attached to those earnings by a buyer will be based on the evaluation of the quality of the intangible assets. And here's where, again, a business owner would really benefit from expert advice on the evaluation of what assets will be looked at by buyers and how they would appraise those assets as well. So um, at Rizolve, we have a formal methodology that scores 24 different value drivers, benchmark against comparables in the market, and we can give our business owners a view as to what the quality of those assets are and the likely multiple that will be attributed to those things. So that's a long-winded way, Bob, of saying that market dynamics and planning for those dynamics and understanding them with your advisor is important to know going into a transaction, particularly where there's a mismatch in expectations from the business owners based on their wants and needs. So
Yeah.
I'm going to stop there, and maybe you can help me take another direction on.
Well, it's
particular.
interesting, right? Because we're talking about business owners. Many of them are entrepreneurs who who founded the company. They've worked with it for 5, 10, 20, could be 30 years. And like all of us, we always think our babies are the cutest ones in the in the bunch, right? And so I would have to think that many business owners, when they're assessing their wants and needs, they've got a very high expectation of what the value of their company is. And that's good. I mean, they've built the company, and I'm sure there's lots of attributes. But how do you balance what those wants and needs are, and the fact that the market is going to take a very specific look at the value of that company and apply their own judgment in terms of what the value is. When you're talking about valuation and you're talking about multiple, I know there's we talk about 24 different categories, but what are just some of the key ones that a buyer will look at? What are some of those criteria?
Well, um, you use the analogy of selling your house, and it's not a good analogy, but in the context of price versus what the market's prepared to pay, It's not a bad analogy. If you bring your main asset, the land and buildings, your house, your cottage, to the market, and you put a very high price on it, which is not supported by comparables in the market, then the market is going to ask, why are you setting the price at that level? And a number of things may happen. There may be a particular reason why the price is high, and that's what the market's looking for. It's You're asking, if it's not supported by a comparable in the market, on the face of it at least, then the market's going to be asking why. Are there unique selling propositions that attach to the asset that you're selling at a high price? Are the factors that differentiate the asset which would cause the price to be higher, or may cause a buyer to pay a premium for acquiring those things? In other words, is a strategic premium for the asset something that can be justified? And bring that back to the business world. The same thing. So having a want or a need which is justified by evidenced good evidence around the need for a strategic premium. If there is good evidence for that, then there may well be buyers that are attracted sufficiently to pay the premium. By the converse, if you bring a house to market and it's not painted, the equipment in it is old and worn out, if it's not located in a particularly attractive location, if there are neighbors next door that have dogs that bark a lot, in other words, the situational requirements, there may be deal killers that cause a buyer to place a discount on a particular asset, because there are unattractive features that so the wants and needs of the seller may become irrelevant if there are deal killer type factors that that need to be understood as you enter the market. And again, advisors are helpful here because they will be able to help you appraise the asset, the business that you've got. They will be able to understand whether there are particular features that are highly attractive in the market and attract a higher price. Maybe there's comparable transactions in the market with similar justifications that drive a higher price on the one side. On another side, there may be negatives that, again, advisors can help you assess and start to manage expectations as to what the likelihood is of being able to get a particular valuation for your business or an asset from the market. So again, advisor, from the point of view of market dynamics, from the point of view of positioning your business for sale, it's critically important to understand how the market thinks, how they will likely appraise the company, what the comparables are in the market for similar transactions. And in doing proper appraisals like that with your business advisors, you will be able to come to market with a good proposition with a higher chance of getting liquidity on selling that asset at the right price.
Right. So interestingly, those last comments that you've just made also drive back to what was the topic of our first podcast in this series, and that was starting early. and planning. Because if I do have certain features of my business as an entrepreneur, if I've got certain features of my business that are unattractive and would detract from the value, if I bring in the right advisors early enough into the process, I can fix them. I can improve them. I can build them up so that I've identified what are the detractors to value and I'm eliminating them, just like I would, to use your analogy, if I was selling my house and it hasn't been painted. If I've got enough time, I'm going to bring a painter in and it's going to make a big difference in the value of the house. But if I'm trying to put my house up for sale tomorrow, I probably lost that opportunity. So again, timing is critical in bringing the advisors to the table so that you can make a difference in the valuation of the company.
I just want to pick up on the variable that you've highlighted, Bob, and that's the time function. Okay, and certainly from the point of view of exit planning, time time is value. The more time you have in order to create an attractive proposition that is aligned with market expectations based on the price that you're wanting, to sell the business or the asset for. Um, Depending on how it presents, you may need more time to get the asset ready for the market, and depending on the types of valuation issues that present early on with your advisors, that time frame may expand to be, in our world, 3 to 5 years. And if you want to sell within a 3 month time frame, um, firstly, we would say we would caution very strongly that uh, selling your business is not like selling a house. It typically takes at best 6 months and likely 12 months to transact and be ready and put together, the deal documents that the market expects. Um, Typically confidential information memorandums, which are the key selling document for your business that explains the business, its assets, its track record, um, and so on, and the market that it operates in. Typically, that document would take a sales professional, like a broker or an investment banker, depending on size of the company, complexity. It's likely going to take several weeks to put that document together. And that would be an expectation of the market that you have a document like that,
Mm.
in order to put together a purchase and sales agreement, a legal document. Once you've identified a buyer that's willing to pay the the value, the price that you want, it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks to write a legal agreement and negotiate a legal agreement. So it would typically take minimum 6 months to transact on a company, and often takes, depending on how due diligence progresses, how quickly you can answer the questions of the buyers satisfactorily. Um, and that could take 2 or 3 months as well. So it is often a 6 to 12 month transaction process.
Right.
If there is a cleanup, or if there are presentational changes, or if there are issues that need to be solved before you go into the transaction, that could take years to put together, in closing any value gaps that we may have with what the market's prepared to pay. So, preparation is key. The time function is important. The shorter the time frame, the less chance we as advisors have, the less chance we have to close the valuation gaps, and the shorter the time frame, and the lack of, and the propensity for um, expectations to be diverging, sellers' expectations versus buyers' expectations. If there's a gap, then often what that drives is an unhappy result. In
Right.
other words, a lower price than the business owner expected, and a a less than happy business owner at the end of the process without preparation.
Yeah. Well, you make a great point about the preparation, and I can speak from experience here because, as you know, in our engagements, I tend to focus on the sales side and the revenue side. And you think about some of the things that would detract from value. Do they have a sales process? Do they have a CRM? And is that CRM actively being used? Do they have the right sales organization in place, or are they depending on an owner who potentially would be leaving with the transaction? Do they have diversification of customers? Are those customer agreements transferable to the next, buyer? Many of those things, are critical to the value of a company, but you can't amend those overnight. It takes time to get the right process in place and to get people using it. Obviously, customer diversification is one that can take a significant amount of time. We've got experience working with some of our clients where 50, 60% of their revenue was coming from one customer. And that is a risk to a buyer. If that customer were to leave, the revenue goes away with it. So building up diversification in your customer base where perhaps no one customer is worth more than 15% of your overall revenue takes time. And you simply can't do that in months or sometimes even years. You need a longer runway to make sure all those things are in place, because those are dead giveaways to a buyer to say, "Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the value that you're ascribing to this business is really there because of these issues." And I'm just talking about sales. As there are other factors, other areas where you need similar amount of time to make sure that you've got all the right pieces in place as value drivers.
Yeah, I mean, picking up from your lead on sales feeding into growth of the company, and expectations for a higher level of business in the future. I think this is an important point that we at Resolve, Bob, focus on a lot. We want to see, if there is a growth proposition that is being sold to the potential buyers, then what the buyers want to see is do you have a plan of attack, um, for capturing that growth? What is the plan? What does the plan say? Do, do we have a documented plan that the sales team operate off of? Um, do do we have a sales process that plans for um, a much higher number of prospects than we actually need to convert in order to achieve the plan? Is the pipeline of prospects and the conversion of that pipeline, um, is it in evidence? Witness your statement about needing a customer relationship management system. Do we have a documented pipeline? Can we evidence what the conversion factors are with the prospects in the pipeline? Can we evidence what the velocity of throughput through that pipeline is? Is it documented with statistics and so on? And all of this feeds into a valuation factor, which is, um, you know, is the plan, is the business growth predictable? This is a valuation driver, and evidence of the valuation driver is having a plan, having had a plan for several years, showing achievement of the plan, having a pipeline of prospects which turn into real sales that get booked in the financial? Do we have financial reporting against the plan? And so on and so forth. Do we have an audited set of financial statements which justifies that sales cutoff has been done properly and so on? All of these things are valuation factors which, when they are presented to buyers, represent real value and evidence of value. Um, and these are the types of things that we talk about as having in place to position for uh, the request that you're making of the market for a particular price. And so all these things dovetail and and need to be planned for and evidenced, and it does take time through the exit planning process. It does take time to put these things together if they are not in place.
Yeah. So, Steve, I think this is really, really good information. And of course, there's many more factors that need to be considered in terms of value drivers. And perhaps what we can do in our next session of this series is drill down onto some of those other factors and just let people know, we've talked a little bit about sales. We've touched a little bit, a very little bit on proper, accounting and financial management. Uh, but certainly those are big topics and we could drill down even more. And perhaps what we should do is defer those to the next session in our series, and discuss them at that point. What do you
Well,
think?
I'm happy to say that um, the next concept that we're going to be addressing in our 5-part series is actually to be clear on what preparedness means. You know, if we, we've talked about why you should plan for your exit, um, but we do want our business owners to be totally clear, particularly if they have a valuation expectation. We want them to be clear on what that valuation expectation means from a buyer's perspective. What evidence will you have to put on the table in order to get agreement with a buyer on the level of value that you want out of your transaction? So we're going to be taking a look at what preparedness means and giving real life examples of that and how we go about that with our clients.
Okay, well, I think that that'll be a really interesting follow up to today's conversation. And on that note, why don't we wrap things up? But let our listeners and viewers know that in the next couple of weeks we'll be back online, so stay tuned. In the meantime, if you are looking for more information, please visit us at our website at www.rizolve.ca. And Rizolve is Rizolve. So again, www.rizolve.ca. And in the meantime, Steve, I want to thank you as always for your insights and any.
No, it's for it. Exit planning is so valuable for business owners. It is not uncommon for us to double or triple the value of a company over a 3 to 5 year period. Um, and we do it every day of the week, and this is what we do. And we're really excited to be able to showcase some of the things that we want business owners to think about, so that they can get prepared for their transition well ahead of time.
Terrific. On that note, I want to bid everyone goodbye, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks in session 4 of this series. Take care now.